Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Jim Miller and Terrence Moore, and the 500th episode of the FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. Jim, before we get started, this is the 500th episode of the FlipSide.
It is indeed.
You have been at this since 2013, my friend.
I have indeed.
Congratulations.
Yes. We've joined you in the last 2 years, and we have had a lot of fun. But before we do that, talk about the journey.
Yeah, you know, it's this was actually the brainchild of a former partner to the show, a guy named Art Callahan, who anybody that's been around Hagerstown for any period of time knows Art. And he and one of my best friends in the world, Sam Cool, and I got together and kind of thought about this show, and I kept thinking it wasn't going to happen, it wasn't going to happen. Of course, Art Art's a get it done kind of guy. So he met with Antietam and said, hey, we'd like to do this. How can we do it? And lo and behold, next thing I know, we're filming cameras, or we're filming shows. And I should also point out that Paul Shirley, who you never see on this show or rarely see on this show, who was sitting on the other side of the equipment doing that part of it, and he's been with us, I think, the entire time. You've been with us the entire time, right, Paul? Since day one.
Wow.
So there's more than one of us that have made this journey in its entirety, and it's been a good journey. And the notion of what we do on the show has changed significantly. We used to be, believe it or not, far more political than we are today. We dealt with a lot more national issues than we probably do today. I'd like to think that we're moving toward more informational. We'll deal with politics if there's something to deal with. We do that hopefully in a respectful manner. That doesn't mean we always agree with our city government, with our municipality governments, with our county government, our state government, or our federal government. But one of the things that we try to do is to make sure that anything that we say on any level is respectful. And quite frankly, if it's not, I'll cut it out of the show before it starts. This show is shot as if it's live, but we don't play games here. And the two of you, I've never had to cut anything.
Yeah.
Well, there's always tonight, right? There's always tonight. But yeah, so we try to be respectful. And we try to be respectful to the guests too. We've had guests that have come on that have had a slip of the tongue, and we've made sure that didn't get aired because it wasn't something that they intended to say. And this is not a gotcha show. It was never designed to be that. It never will be that as long as I'm in this chair.
The power of the FlipSide.
The power of the FlipSide. I'm not sure we're very powerful, but I'm amazed, and I know you've mentioned this too, Terrence and Reggie, that at the number of times I'll walk into someplace and somebody will start talking to me about a topic, and lo and behold, I'll find out that they saw us on the show and they actually watch. So it is it's humbling to say the least. But I hope we do some good in the community.
And in that time frame, you can run down the number of panelists and guests that are in this community, outside this community. That's like a who's who of everything in every facet. So I think there's very few degrees of separation from anyone from this show based on the number of guests and panelists that you've had. So thank you.
So I don't do the quid pro quo thing. I never look for anything in return, but I got to tell you, the coolest show that sticks in my mind, well, there's two of them actually, and that was number one, the archaeologist that we had here.
Yes, Dr. Julie Shablisky.
And that show, that woman is absolutely amazing. The other one, and this was the quid pro quo moment, we had the deputy director of this of transportation for the state of Maryland, and he brought me 2 license plates that are engraved with the FlipSide on them. Now, of course, you can't use those on your car,
right?
But that was the coolest thing. They're hanging in my office to this day.
Nice.
So,
well, good stuff. Kudos, my friend. It's
Thank you.
been an honor to be here the last 2 years. I look forward to my Wednesdays, coming in and pontificating with you guys. And, you know, in an era where the Harold Mills coverage has shrunk of our community, I feel like we fill in the void on some of these things and talk about some things that otherwise there's not conversation about. So if if conversation is sparked in regards to topics we bring up well beyond these walls, I feel like we've done a good job.
And I can tell you it is, if only by the number of people that have blocked me on Facebook.
That's how you know you're doing something right.
Yeah, that's it. All right, gentlemen, well, let's jump into the topics. The legislative session is over. Budgets have been passed, bills have been passed. We got a lot of moving pieces in regards to where we're going, but let's kind of look at the budget. In regards to the budget, looking at the capital budget, I perused through. I'll name a couple of things that's coming to our community just to make our viewers aware. Our Fine Arts Museum has a project going, and they've went through their feasibility study and their surveys, and it looks like they very well may be going to fundraising next, but they were awarded $1.25 million towards their efforts. Also that I saw on the list as I flipped down, because I highlighted a few, because if you've ever taken a look at the budget, the capital budget alone is 275 pages. So it is quite a lot to go through.
Can I just say something just for a minute about the Museum of Fine Arts?
Yes.
I have not seen the exhaustive list of things that they want to do, but listening to Kelly, I believe her name is, and
Kelly Mealy, yes.
Yeah, and some of the other folks over at the museum. I mean, they are like a kid in the candy store, not because of what they're going to get, but because of the things they can offer the youth in our community, the community at large, and frankly, bringing people in from other communities. The museum has been an amazing feature for Hagerstown and Washington County, even without this expansion.
Yes.
Imagine what the possibilities are now.
And I believe it also builds upon untraditional education. I know that we've seen in COVID and we had a real focus on some of the glaring holes in education, but this was one of the times when community stepped in to support the educational system and kind of backfill some of that art and history education that they offer, and they will be able to offer at a higher level now with some of the expansion. And also, you know, building out tourism and bringing more people into the community and more exposure to Washington County. So,
Bob Brucci calls it feet on the street, and he's absolutely right on that point. We do, the more feet on the street, the better off we are.
Absolutely. Also on the list for here in the city of Hagerstown, the city of Hagerstown was awarded $3 million for the field house project. Now, there was $2 million that was already allocated in the budget from last session. They actually were seeking $17 million. Obviously, with reductions in the budget, there was going to be haircuts all over the place.
Right.
So, but they were fortunate to get another $1 million towards that project. And I know that they're working on their budget as we speak. And they're looking to finance, I believe, about 18 to 19 million. That's something I think we should really talk about
In depth later?
in depth more, to think that in this economic environment that the city is looking to put 18 million on the taxpayers' back.
Well, and even with our outstanding credit rating, I'm assuming that rates are going up for municipalities and state and municipality
Yes.
borrowing, just like they are when we finance mortgages for new houses.
right, and inflation on labor costs and materials still at an all-time high. So those dollars don't go as far either.
Right, right. And that's something in bonds or in some of the bills that we've seen that Senator Corderman was seeking to address, but we'll get to those things. Also, what I see is the proposed Meredith School of Medicine is receiving $1.5 million towards their effort. I know they were looking for a significant larger ask from the state, but they did receive $1.5 million to go towards that effort as well.
And that's a win.
Thoughts? Yes.
That's definitely a win, because I know that former Governor Hogan had allocated a large amount of money towards healthcare and medical facilities in his proposed budget before leaving office, and there was a threat of all that money being lost. So I do know that Meredith and a lot of advocates did their due diligence over the last few months to try to get back and carve some of those dollars out. And it was a very competitive market across the entire state. Just like education, we know that healthcare and medical support was something that a lot of industries, a lot of individual organizations were going to look to in that industry.
Yes. And things are fast moving with the medical school. They've hired their dean. Construction is underway. Naming rights were announced recently in regards to the Bowman Foundation stepping up for that. So a lot of exciting things happening there. I was at the reception last night, and some of the numbers that came out of that, they're projecting about 1,600 jobs.
Wow.
That are going to come to this community because of that. I know that from my service on the foundation that the case study of the community in Alabama that did a project is this, it added $300 million to the local GDP, I believe, over a 10-year period. So there's
some very high skilled jobs that are included in that. Obviously you need all levels of people
yes.
to run those types of operations.
Yes.
But the point is they're not just all what we would call, well, there's no employment that's bad employment. I don't want my comments to think to say that there is, but
no, but you're going to have your students, you're going to have your faculty,
right?
All of those things.
You're going to have your support staff,
facilities and
facilities,
maintenance,
exactly, all of that, and they're going to need housing,
right?
And I know that there's some projects that are happening so that boom in population can be taken advantage of downtown and offering amenities that go along with the stadium and things like that. So there's a lot of moving pieces in regards to what's happening in downtown in the next few years.
Absolutely. And again, getting back to the crime situation downtown, I am still of the opinion that if you populate and flourish the downtown with all of these good things that you want, I think you're going to lose some of the bad element that, to whatever extent it exists, and I'm not going to comment on that at this point, but to whatever extent it exists, because they don't want to be out. They want to be in the corners. And if the corners are filled with medical school students and Barbara Ingram school students and University of Maryland at Hagerstown school students and baseball attendees and Maryland theater concert goers or whatever, not much room for them, is there?
Yeah, and I think as a step right before that is to fill those empty and vacant properties downtown as well. I think when you have more feet on the street, then you create a commodity that small businesses want to tap into. So there's some indirect economic boom that comes because now you start to attract more small businesses or even larger businesses that want to be in the downtown area. And when those doors open up and there's no empty storefronts and movement of people going in and out of shops, walking up and down the street in cars, and some of it gets hidden and some of it goes away. And I think just proportionally having more people down there who are consumers will outnumber those people who are out there that are maybe vagrant. And also more dollars possibly coming into the community creates more tax dollars, which allows our municipalities to do something about the homelessness and more about the epidemic of abuse that we're seeing in the community as well.
I think if you're looking at the feet on the street and all of that, the glaring need is a grocery store downtown. I know that Goodwill has their effort going, but I'm not sure where or how that's moving. Much hasn't been communicated to the public. I know there was a bond bill out there to help that effort that did not make it through this session. But a for-profit grocery store within walking distance of all these amenities and the housing that's going to be downtown, I think is going to be an important piece.
And just the rumors of what's going on at the outlets, right? Again, I can't speak to exactly what's happening because I don't know all that information, but there's rumors that the outlets may be closing, maybe turning into possibly something residential, possibly as well. But there are stores there. There is still a consumer base, a retail base that needs to be supplemented. And even though some of those stores start to say, we're going to go downtown instead or go into the mall, so we support our mall, right, as well as possibly support our downtown with more stronger retail and established retail at that, not just new entrepreneurs that are coming in and maybe open for 6 months to a year, but retailers that are, national retailers that are located in our downtown would help a great deal as well.
And what you're saying is basically we need to have Julie Rahm back on the show very soon to get to a bottom of some of these issues in regards to what she may be able to speak about. Also, in regards to receiving funding, the Robert W. Johnson Community Center, we've talked about that a few times before, received $2.5 million towards the renovation of their facility. And if you start to look at the Johnson Street corridor going north, I mean, you have some exciting things happening, right? You have the brewery coming in at one end. You have the multi-million-dollar renovation of the community center and the revitalization of their pool. And then in the summertime, you're going to have the demolition of the Boys and Girls Clubs and the start of construction of their new facility there.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to see some growth and expansion and in dollars invested outside of the city center that can be piggybacked off of, and I think it's an exciting time.
And an important investment for our community. And by the way, what is your phrase? Whatever storm is coming our way.
Winter is coming.
Whatever winter is coming our way. That is, in my view, that is government investment that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, the Moore administration did say that that no one or no community would be left behind. Investing in a community such as the Johnson Street community that many of us feel has been left behind for decades is strong. I mean, it's an extension of the down payments that the Hogan administration put down. This is a bigger sample size for that down payment, and I'm excited to see what's coming next because, that community is challenged with home ownership. I think we've talked about the numbers before. The city of Hagerstown has home ownership of about 40%. The Jonathan Street community only has 14% home ownership, and obviously to stabilize a community, you need more homeowners. You need more of those with a stake and an invested interest in that community, and revitalizing historic structures like the Robert W. Johnson Community Center, and where resources and amenities can be provided to the community. Hopefully, it's going to lead to some of those other projects as well.
And no matter what the governor says about no one being left behind, the cities and the counties have to have that same mindset.
Yes.
It starts at home. You can't ask anyone to do something that you won't do for yourself.
Yes.
So I think you need to show that united front here locally, and then you would garner greater support, right? No one wants to give to division, right? Because you're not going to see the return on that investment wholly. So, and I speak to this, and I'll be honest, a lot of the work that for the Robert W. Johnson Community Center took community members and advocates to go down to Annapolis and advocate independently. Right. So let's just be honest and be true about how that came about, and which is good. It's good for the community, and it's good for all. Because a rising tide lifts all ships, and we have to look at it that way. And we look at the core from the Jonathan Street community all the way to the other side of the red line block of Summit Avenue, where the stadium is happening, where we're doing a connection of the north end and the south end, and as we revitalize our downtown. And that's where the benefit happens, when we all work together and every ship rises collectively. Right. And whether it's happening by municipalities or our individual advocates in the community, everyone needs to work together.
Yeah. And one thing that you're saying and what has been evidenced is that normally when you look at your municipality as a whole, there are competing interests, from the city to the county, or what individual communities want when it comes to Annapolis. The main focus of the city was the field house. I mean, even their efforts towards the clinic that they were, the 24-hour clinic, kind of took a back seat to the field house. But no one was advocating for the disadvantaged portions of the community. And I think one of the things that these efforts show is that you don't have to always wait on your politicians. You can establish your own networks, your own relationships, and go directly to the state and advocate for the needs of your community. Because I know that some people, when they hear this news, will say, well, why is the Jonathan Street community getting all this attention? Because residents and those that care stood up and says, no, we're going to go fight for them. The story was articulated, the data was provided in regards to the disparities that have been generational and the disparities that happened in the midst of COVID. And that information was presented to the governor and the legislature, hence $2.5 million later to help move that along. So hopefully this is an encouraging thing for our community that, sometimes your politicians are going to disappoint you. Their agenda is not going to be your agenda. Many of our politicians are worried about the next election cycle and what's going to look good in the next ribbon cutting. But you can have a grassroots effort where you fight for what you want in your community. And when you get the vote, you get to hold those politicians accountable that are not speaking up for your community.
Well, and I know this quote predates the name that I'm going to mention by many years, but Mike Callis, former businessman in Hagerstown, there are several things named after him in this community. An amazing man. His comment was always, his quote was always, the world is run by those who show up.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, Reggie, is that if you want to, the worst that the state is empowered to do is tell you no. Isn't it worth that risk to gather your facts and go fight on behalf of your community and your neighbors for a better life? And I'm not suggesting, as the Republican or as a Republican on this panel, I'm not suggesting I want the state or the county or the city or the federal government to finance all of our needs. I don't want that at all.
Agreed.
No.
But I think they can put an environment together that facilitates that happening.
Well, the thing is, when you start to look at former red line communities like the Jonathan Street community, you're going to be hard pressed to find investors that want to come in. So sometimes you need a kickstart. Mm-hmm. And what the government has provided is a kickstart. And where do you kickstart? You kickstart with one of the oldest properties in Washington County that is tied to the founder, right? In the cabin, in the revitalization of the cabin. Where do you go to next? You know, there was an effort to go to the park and for an effort to revitalize it and make functional for the community the caretaker home. The city decided to go into another direction and tear that down for some sprinklers and parking. Okay. So then you transition and you go to the community center, which is the oldest standing institution in the Jonathan Street community, been standing since 1888, huge historic value, and it has been the nucleus of that community since it was built. It has went from the first black school to the YMCA to the community center. And it really has been really in disrepair for a number of years, operating on shoestring budgets of people of goodwill, but not having the resources that it needed to run properly. You know, when African Americans could not swim anywhere else, that swimming pool that was built for them by the city in 1958 was the place that African Americans could swim. Everyone in the community has a huge tie and connection to that. That pool has been inoperable for about 7 years now because the maintenance and upkeep wasn't there, and now that restoration is in full bloom. And you know, that pool will be done this summer, probably with a full opening next summer. So there's a lot of things that are happening there that can move the needle in regards to revitalization and make home ownership more attractive within that community. Because again, the same thing that you're saying in regards to the core of the city, in regards to if you build it up, you'll drive out the mess. The same thing within the microcosm in that community. You build up your home ownership base, you look at rezoning to be able to bring businesses back to that community. You can drive out all the other bad elements and then allow this historic district to thrive again.
Well, one person comes in, buys a house, fixes it up, the neighbor says, wow, look at that. Have I looked at my property? It doesn't look so good. I need to, you know, trim the hedges or do whatever. It's
Yep.
contagious. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
First it's will, but then it's access.
That's
Access
it.
to capital.
Access to capital. And that's another piece of what we're looking at working on. Because if you're looking at a community, and I know we need to wrap, but if you're looking at a community that has depressed property values, it's hard to get access to capital. You know, in many ways, that the Jonathan Street community is still redlined today. And those are some of the things that many of us have sought to address in a number of ways. But the historic value of this community is hugely important, not only to our community, but to the state of Maryland and the national story. And it's wonderful to see that in roughly about a 3 to 4 year period, we're seeing over $5 million of investment that's went into this community. So it's been pretty awesome. Yeah. So gentlemen, let's take a break right here. Let's come back with a little bit more of the things that we saw from a legislative standpoint and keep it rolling. Fair enough?
Perfect.
On our 500th episode of the
On our
FlipSide.
500th episode.
Yeah. Stay with us. We'll have more after the break. We'll have more after the break.
There you go.
Welcome back to the show. Gentlemen, let's keep this 500 show rolling here. Looking a little bit more at some of the bond bills and capital budget items that were funded. The town of Boonesboro received $100,000 in regards to drinking water and wastewater infrastructure.
1 million.
Oh yeah, excuse me, $1 million. in regards to that. We also see the Korean War Veterans Museum received $25,000. Now, is that museum built, or is this a feasibility study for that? Do we know?
I don't know.
I'm not familiar with
No, I'm not familiar with that one either.
a museum there. The Springfield Farm Manor House in Williamsport received $320,000. And then I see Hagerstown School renovation. I'm not sure if that's North or South High, but it looks like there was $750,000 allocated for that as well. Just a few more items just to kind of run through them, and I'll let you guys kind of round out, how you feel about these. The Hancock Downtown Beautification Project received $100,000. The Interfaith Service Coalition, they received property upgrades for $45,000. The North High 400-meter practice track that they have received $50,000. I know that they had a bond bill they were looking for, I believe, $500,000, but they received $50,000 in regards to that.
But they have skin in that game too.
They do have skin in the game.
Yeah,
when
they
we
are.
looked at that, they had raised some funds to kind of get that project going. So this gets them a little bit further down
It
the road,
does. It does. But I didn't want our viewers to think that this was just all funded by the state, because it's not.
No. When we looked at that bond bill sheet, it showed that they had skin in the game in regards to that. And then the other one that I see here is HCC's Advanced Training Center that received $294,000. The other thing to note is this was not in the capital budget, but our stadium project, because of inflationary pressures and I'm sure the negotiations with the car wash that changed the budget of things, was a little short of what they needed. So the creative bond bill that was out here was for the Maryland Stadium Authority to increase their authority from $200,000 to $220,000. Excuse me, $200 million to $220 million. And I believe it also allowed for nonprofits to be able to oversee a portion of the funding, such as Chief, because I believe normally municipalities handle the funding. So it looks like, and that bill did pass, so $220 million was allocated, which should make up the difference of what was lacking in our ball field project to go there. Terrence, I'll come to you first. What say you of this list, and what do you see, and what are your thoughts?
I see diversity across the board. I like to see that some of different parts of the community really got some funding and support. The numbers may not be as big as a lot of the dollars that we've seen of the initial ask, but I'd rather see incremental dollars go across the board than one major thing get funded and other things kind of fall by the wayside, especially with a new administration. So to see a governor come in that really doesn't understand, because there was a very quick turnaround for the governor as well. The governor comes in, gets elected, gets sworn in January, and there's a budget already on the table left by the prior government, and you want to kind of make your stake there, right? You really probably will leave your impression, and if this is your first budget. And also, this is the first year where there was more legislative control over the budget than previous years as well, which you had to get acclimated into, of the horse trading that happens there. And I think, again, I don't know about saying it was a home run holistically as we kind of do a deep dive and understand how everything plays together, but just at a glance here in Western Maryland, looking at some of the dollars, I like this. I really like this, what I see as far as some of the funding.
Well, Jim, one of the things we always talk about, we as a community, we are a net taker.
Yes, we are.
In regards to that, and it seems like we did pretty well. And the $100 million for the I-81 funding is one thing that we haven't talked about that's encompassed in this as well. But from looking at this list, how do you feel about it? What's your takeaways?
So I would agree with Terrence largely about the notion of having a lot of little projects, or relatively little. That said, that's not normally who I am. I'm a go big or go home kind of guy. And I've said that about many projects in this community in the past, and I still feel that that's true today. But to your point, you have a brand new governor who's learning the ropes, who wants to make sure that he solidifies his concern and his support of all of the various communities in Maryland, not just the city of Baltimore, not just the DC corridor, but Southern Maryland, Western Maryland, Mid-Maryland. And I think he's done that with some of these funding funding opportunities.
And
I
let's not
think-
forget, though, Jim, just to add, there was a write-down of the budget, right?
Yes, there
There was a write-down of the revenue, so there was a challenges there in regards
there
to
were
less
absolutely
dollars.
there was absolutely challenges, but the 93 bills that he signed into law on Tuesday, looking at the actual law portion of this, not just the budget, many of which obviously have budget impact, but he, I mean, clearly he left a big impression on what was passed and what was funded. So I think he really has hit the ground running. Now, some may disagree with where he is running to, and I may disagree with certain projects. But I do like your point, Terrence, that I think he really has spread the wealth, so to speak.
And you got to think, he also came in with a $100 million promise to the community for the I-81, right? And that happened when President Biden came into town and kind of said, and gave
congratulations,
Trone,
Congressman Trone.
Yes, gave it to Congressman Trone as kind of being a big advocate for that. And that was a win that possibly could have garnered some votes for those campaigning at that time as well. And he kept that in the budget. And it could have been at risk. And from what I heard, it was at risk. That's a large dollar amount to kind of allocate.
Yeah. But it's also critically important.
It absolutely is critically important. But when you talk about go big or go home, that was big enough.
Well, that's very big.
That was easy to say. You've got enough. That's a big ticket item that this community has been fighting for some time right now. And I'm sure you think about the decade of FlipSide. How many times did that come up?
Oh, every year.
Exactly.
Every year.
Exactly.
It in the baseball stadium.
Right. And to see those two projects come in, and I got to say this too. Senator Quarterman is out there trying to bat 1,000 right now. And really bringing home some large ticket items to this community that has been asked for and needed for over a decade in some cases as well. So I think to see all the different investments on top of such a large investment of that $100 million staying in the Consolidated Transportation Plan, as well as the $1 million that's going to the Route 11 bridge relocation and replacement planning and study in Williamsport, I think that's a big win for this community. It may not be flashy, as far as what people see, but I think there's a lot of infrastructure dollars that are there as well that we're going to get benefit from for years to come.
Well, and I got to tell you, as a first-time senator, I think that Senator McKay, while he was more in the background, I think, than I expected this session, his fingerprints are on a lot of this as well, and I think he has certainly advocated well for the constituents that he serves.
Agree.
The one thing that strikes me is that, our uniqueness in Western Maryland in regards to our history and culture is well represented in these numbers as well, in regards to, dollars that are supporting those efforts of different museums and different causes that highlight those things that make us unique. So, I also see in here the Douglas G. Bass Museum in Boonesboro. They were looking for substantially more, but it looks like they received $200,000 in a bond bill to move that project along. So, that along with the Fine Arts Museum, the Korean War Veterans Museum, the historic, like the Springfield Farm Manor House, like all of those things, along with the Robert W. Johnson Community Center, which is again the oldest institution that is in the John Street community, is you touched a lot of anchors in various parts of the community that are hugely important to them and add to our uniqueness. So kudos to the well-roundedness of what we were able to receive in a challenging environment where the budget was shrinking and there was some concern in regards to what dollars we were going to be able to bring home.
Let me say this as well. A lot of it brings some tourism and brings some feet to our streets as well. If you look at some of the museum and some of those investments. But what stood out to me is that the CVB's ask for the visitor center didn't get the funding when they were one of the few that came to the table with operational costs and a secure plan already in place,
right.
And they didn't get those dollars. So I'm hoping that those dollars weren't given through this capital budget because there's another path forward for that, because I believe that ties a lot of these investments together as far as being a centralized location for visitors to come with the stadium coming, with the museum investments and things like that, and losing that space that was originally downtown as well.
Yeah, and one of the things we don't know if the Department of Housing and Community Development may be an avenue for them in their cycles to get some funding towards those projects to kickstart them as well.
Well, I hope there's very little argument that our CVB is very active in this community.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, very active across the country, frankly, touting what we have here in Washington County.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Out of this, gentlemen, anything else that stands out to you guys in regards to what did or did not happen for our community? Jim?
I think there are certainly things that I disagree with in the legislative packages and the bills that passed. We'll save that for another day because I understand we may have one or more of our state senators join us here on the flip side.
Yes.
So I will save that for another day. But I think the items we highlighted, I am in total support of.
Excellent. Terrence, any wrap-up thoughts?
You know, something that I've been fielding a lot of questions on over the last week or so is the legalization of cannabis. I know there was no really funding tied to that, but I know you've been watching the news and reading the paper. You've seen that the city of Hagerstown has been really trying to put a plan in place in some ordinances around what comes from this legalization, where it can be sold at, where it can be consumed at, and especially since there's going to be lounge licensing that's going to be opening up as of July 1st as well. And I think there's some impact there as we look holistically to this community. I know, cannabis has a mixed emotion with a lot of people, but if you start looking at the benefits of it economically, now that recreation is going to allow for 9% taxes on recreational versus medicinal not having those taxes allocated to it. But also, as we start to deal with some of the addiction in our communities as well, and the growing science that this legalization is supposed to be investing in to see if there's some benefit to managing addiction with marijuana. Again, the science is still out. People believe what they believe, and absolutely they're allowed to do so as much, but it is good to see that this be put into place with the right controls in place for adult use recreational marijuana, and not open up the floodgates and let everybody, start selling, as we've seen in other parts of the country, and some of the impacts of that as well. So that's going to happen on a small scale, thinking about some of the larger growers that we have right here in our backyard that many people don't even know about. Some of the largest growers in the state of Maryland are right in Washington County, and what those dollars are going to look like, and what that's going to look like for some of the local laws and municipalities, ordinances in the months and years to come.
Yeah, I think waiting in this particular case was a good thing, because I do think we've learned from some of the other states that have, as you suggest, just given out wholesale licenses. Go to the movie theater, give me a large popcorn and a doobie, right?
Right. From my vantage point, in looking at what I saw and kind of looking from the campaign, Governor Moore and Speaker Jones, they walked the Jonathan Street community, along with Congressman Trone. And Governor Moore actually was at the unveiling of the rendering for the Dolman Black Heritage Museum. On his visit here, he had his campaign bus out. There was a big hoopla around there, but that project wasn't able to garner any support to move forward. So that was kind of interesting, kind of in the horse trading, that, Governor Moore kind of had a stump speech in the community, but did not see his way to contribute to that effort. So it'll be interesting to see where they go to kind of keep things moving there. I know how much of a tall ask, $5 million over the last 3 or 4 years has been for the Jonathan Street community. But now when you have a $23 million ask out there, when the community really doesn't have a lot of the infrastructure to support that, it'll be interesting to see how they're able to piece that project and stair-step their way to success there as well.
Well, perhaps Governor Moore has some of the same concerns that others have about where that project has been, where it's going, and we've heard about this for years and years and years, with all due respect, and frankly, it's not gone anywhere, has it?
Well, you make a fair point. But there's a rendering there. We know that the city is advocates. Obviously, the city puts skin in the game. in regards to actually buying the Coca-Cola building, but they've since been paid back from the Department of Housing and Community Development. So from that standpoint, they have the taxpayers off the hook relative to that.
I get that. I'm just saying, I think that we have to have, I think the community's got to have some skin in the game. And yeah, I fail to see that one at this point, and I hope somebody can prove me 100% wrong, because I think the artifacts are important, but I don't see it at this point.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, gentlemen, let's hold there, and then we'll come back with some more information in our 500th episode.
Our Fast Five for our 500th episode.
That's a tongue twister. Our Fast Five.
Our 500th Fast Five.
Right. All right, stay with us. We'll have more FlipSide after the break.
All right.
I just wanted to take a shot at that.
I see. I know you couldn't help yourself.
I just couldn't tell.
Don't.
Back to the show. Gentlemen, let's jump into Fast Five. We're limited since you guys have been long-winded. So let's make sure we're
Wait a
efficient
minute.
with
Terrence,
these topics.
who's been long-winded?
He knows. He knows. That's why he had to call it out.
Jeez.
First topic up, Williamsport and Smithsburg volunteer EMS workers to shift to county employment. Jim, what say you?
Yeah, good idea. It's really a necessity in my view, just because their one and only goal is when somebody needs them to be there.
Right.
And the staffing shortages have made that, I guess, ever increasingly difficult, and I think this is a good idea. I think it was a smart move. It's going to take some time to do. I think it'll have benefits for our community.
Yeah. Terrence.
Some people may not be happy, but at the same time, from a human resource standpoint, consolidating, using like resources makes them more efficient long term and also more cost effective.
So better for our safety.
Yes, absolutely.
Got it. Next topic, gentlemen. Public comments are offered, or the public is offered a chance to ask questions about Hickory and Fountain Rock school closings.
Yeah, so this, I guess, the only questions I have about this are what's going to happen to those buildings? And how are they going to be redeployed? Are they going to be torn down? What's going to happen to them? Hickory is not as old a school as I think some others in the community. Hickory was built when I was a kid, which granted was many years ago. We won't talk about that, Terrence. But, and I don't know when Fountain Rock was built. I'm sure it was older. But there's obviously, I trust that there's sound reason why we're doing this. But I think one of the important parts of it, just like we had with our old hospital, is they knew what they were going to do with that building before it was ever vacated. And I see, the Winter Street School that was abandoned a while back. How long did that sit there? And I mean, what is it being utilized for now? I don't know.
Yeah. Terrence, what say you?
I think this is a great opportunity that, what I've seen in New York is for a charter school model. Offer that up for some of these unique charter schools that may come in and privatize education to a point to take the burden off the public school system, give a more unique education for those in need. And I think, I know everybody doesn't agree with that, but I think that model helps and makes use of these buildings, especially in the area of workforce development.
Are you familiar with any consultants that could help folks along the way of that?
Yes, I am.
Next topic, gentlemen. Maryland authorities investigate hatchery valve closure that killed thousands of trout.
Yeah, so essentially these runways continually provide oxygen for
Yes.
these little tiny fish. And there were, upwards of 15 or 25,000 that were potentially killed. Somebody went in and turned the valve off in the middle of the night. That's what happened. I mean, this is senseless.
Right.
I just don't understand why this is senseless. And I hope they catch them and hang them up by their Buster Browns.
Like visually, it looked horrible.
It did.
It
well,
looked
it is horrible.
right?
You killed 15,000 living things.
But the economic impact, I wouldn't have expected it would be 75,000.
I don't know where that number comes from, but
yeah.
I mean, these things were hatched, last October? So it's taken them this long. So
Right. So
you know,
you're-
what's going to
you're
happen to
behind.
what's going to happen to the 2024 fishing season? And here's the deal: we make money off of fishing in Maryland,
Yeah.
right? I bought a trout stamp and a fishing license just a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And the operational cost is still tied to what it took to breed and help with that development as well. So all that dollars are actually waste, right? Because
And-
you don't have a product anymore.
Right, and now to make up for it, maybe we have to go and buy fish that are already at a certain, and you know, it's like when you buy this size fish, it's X cents, and when you buy this size fish, it's Y cents.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it. I don't know. I don't know why somebody would do that. I just
Well,
don't
hopefully they're
understand
caught and dealt with appropriately,
it. Yep,
and they have to pay restitution to take care
I
of
hope
the
so.
problem.
Agreed.
Fourth topic, gentlemen, the real reason cities want workers to return to the office. And just to talk about that locally, I've recently heard that Fiserv is having their employees come back to the office 4 days out of 5 for the work week. But in regards to this topic, what say you, Terrence?
I think everyone's seen the convenience of remote work, but didn't understand the indirect impact of it. And I know we've talked about it on the show. You know, even from an employers, you know, there's more vacant buildings. There's business owners paying substantial amount for unoccupied space. But there's also other small businesses that surround these large businesses that don't see those feet on the street anymore because people aren't coming to work.
Yes.
If people aren't coming to work, they're not going out to lunch. They're not grabbing something before they go home. They're not passing by. They're not having meetings downtown. So there's an economic impact to not having people occupy those spaces.
Right, and even from a banking standpoint, I know that analysts are looking into the banks that hold a lot of commercial real estate and what are the impacts to that as these facilities are vacated and what's going to happen to those companies in that real estate. So it seems like there's a cascading effect that no one really thought about at the time, and companies are starting to force folks' hand. Jim, what say you?
So I'm going to be the dissenting view on that. You're right, there is going to be an impact. And you're right, there won't be people potentially visiting the local restaurants, at least not while they're at work. But then again, when we went from the Postal Service using horses to deliver to using trucks, well, a lot of farriers were put out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Things change. The reason that I believe the kickback is happening on this is because we have New York and San Francisco. San Francisco said their office vacancy rate increased to a record high of 29.4%. New York says they've had a 43% decline in leasing in the fourth quarter of 2022 compared to the same period in 2021. Yes, people are going to be forced back to the office. I think that trend's going to reverse again.
Yeah.
You want green? Forget about higher gas standards. Keep people off the road. You want efficiency? I work a lot harder from home than I would in an office.
Better
frankly.
quality of life.
And you want better quality of life? I don't have to put my dog in a kennel all day. She can sit right there on the little seat beside me, and I can let her out when she needs to go out. And yes, there's interruptions when the Amazon guy comes to the front door. But we make that work. I think this is short-lived. I think we're going to go back to those that can be remote are going to be remote.
But I'm just saying, it's selfish, because also is quality employees. Because now, right here in Hagerstown, Maryland, I can have someone who is living in New York City work for me directly versus me just hiring locally as well.
Right. And by the way, for the New York businesses, they can probably get the Hagerstown person cheaper than they could get the. Now, and I'm not saying they should do that. I think that we pay for the job, not for the geography. But I'm just saying.
But you have the employee, but you don't have the dollars that they spend by being residents.
Yeah.
So there's a loss to you if they're not coming into the office.
And gentlemen, to keep us on task, I know this is a topic we're going to definitely need to come back to, and probably need to be a full segment to explore.
Absolutely.
But to keep us on task, our fifth topic and last topic of the night, and this is a horrendous one. Inmate allegedly punches a pregnant medical worker in the stomach, killing the fetus.
Okay. So my take on this, I don't know whether he was pointing to you or not, but I'm gonna steal
Go
your
for
thunder.
it.
Go right for it.
So here's the deal. If fetuses are not babies, how can you kill it? I mean, legally, what is the recourse against this person? I think this is where the pro-choice argument, and for the record, not a choice I'd ever make, but I am pro-choice. But this is where that argument falls down. Because if I am sure that mother wants, I won't say revenge, but wants the legal
She wants
system's
justice.
job.
Right. Yeah.
How do they do that? That's a very difficult case in my view.
Yeah, and I'm all for the law, but I think we get into those details. What's wrong is wrong. I think we just need to get back
It
to
is
principles.
wrong. Amen.
I think we just
Thank
because
you.
if someone gets off for doing this on a technicality of something that comes into abortion rights, which we know is going to come
It is
up
gonna
and
happen.
It's going to be a topic. We just need to get back to doing what's right and making principled decisions
Right.
and holding people accountable.
Agreed. All right, gentlemen, we pulled it off. We got our Fast Five done in our 500th episode. I hear Paul coming out to reprimand us to tell us to cut it short. But
10 minutes.
but we were able to make it happen.
And we have a cake.
And we have a cake.
We have a FlipSide 500th episode cake. And Paul, thank you for being here for 500
Are
episodes.
you able to tip that up without spilling it over to you to show our audience our FlipSide cake?
There you
Excellent.
go. That's the best I'm going to do without making a fool of myself.
All right. Take us out, Reggie.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure and it's been an honor to be here for the 500th show, Jim. So thanks a lot. That is all the time that we have for tonight. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. But more importantly, join us next week for another episode of The Flip Side.